The Leader of the Opposition, Mr Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's a pleasure to second the humble address. Many people across the country today will be wishing Her Majesty a very happy 90th birthday, and these benches send our warmest greetings to add to that. May I say, Mr Speaker, as a relatively young whippersnapper, I'm fully in favour of our country having leaders of a finer vintage. Today, we're talking about a highly respected individual who is 90. And, Mr Speaker, whatever differing views people across this country have about the institution, the vast majority share an opinion that Her Majesty has served this country and has overwhelming support with a clear sense of public service and public duty, as the Prime Minister just indicated. She's carried out that duty with enormous warmth. My dear friend Mildred Gordon, the former member for Bow Poplar, who recently died aged 92 and whose funeral is tomorrow, met the Queen at the opening of the Docklands Light Railway. The Queen asked Mildred how she was getting on as a newly elected MP. And Mildred replied with the devastating honesty she replied to everything. She said she felt she had very little power to help her constituents. So the Queen took her on one side and, with her customary wit, said, "Once they find out you lot can't help them, they all write to me." Her Majesty was born less than a month before the general strike, the first daughter who would later and unexpectedly become heir to the throne. Was born 2 years, as the Prime Minister pointed out, before all women in Britain got the vote. Her childhood was during the mass poverty and the long slump of the 1930s, her teenage years through the brutal carnage of the Second World War, and at war's end, she experienced firsthand the joy of people as the young princess walked through the streets of London. A very moving oral history that I'm very pleased was replayed on Radio 4 this morning. Oral history of our time and our lives, indeed before the times of most of us in this House today. She became Queen at just 25 years old following the death of her father, and she's reigned for nearly 64 years, the longest reigning monarch in our history. In that time, our country has become a better and more civilised place. We've enacted equality legislation, we've ended colonialism, we've created the National Health Service, the welfare state, and the Open University. And as head of the Commonwealth, she's been a defender of this incredible multicultural global institution for which we're all very grateful, the way she stood up for the Commonwealth and visited, I think, every country within the Commonwealth. And the Prime Minister was quite right to draw attention to her historic visit to Ireland in 2011 and the way she spoke in the Irish language at the reception that was held for her in Dublin during that visit. Today, Mr Speaker, I'm welcoming two more nonagenarians from my constituency to Parliament, and both have a link with the celebration we're conducting today. Iris Monaghan and George Durack. Iris was born in what is now the Republic of Ireland, but was then part of Britain. She came to London in 1951, before the coronation, and was a Crown civil servant in the Inland Revenue. She's helped collect taxes ever since 1951, which has helped to keep us all in the state to which we're accustomed. George fought in the Second World War, serving in the 1st Battalion of the Rifle Brigade, attached to the 7th Armoured Division, and had a daily close affinity with Her Majesty throughout his working life, because he worked for the Royal Mail, delivering Her Majesty's head through letterboxes all over North London. And yesterday, Mr Speaker, I was present at the graduation of a 91-year-old constituent who's just completed her 3rd degree, a master's no less, at Birkbeck College. It proves you're never too late to take up a new career and learn something else. It is their generation, the Queen's generation and my parents' generation, that defeated the horrors of fascism in Europe, that endured the privations of the post-war era, who built a more civilised and equal Britain. We have much to be grateful for to that generation. And on her coronation in 1953, Her Majesty was driven through Upper Street in my borough, but her crowning achievement in Islington was to come some years later. You'll enjoy this, Mr. Speaker. In 2006, she was due to open the new Emirates Stadium in my constituency, but had to pull out due to an injury. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, this is a fate that has afflicted far too many of Arsenal's squad in subsequent years. So we must congratulate her on her prescience. My honourable friend, the member for Hornsey and Wood Green, was then the leader of Islington Council. And as the Queen could not attend the opening, they were invited to Buckingham Palace, and she accompanied the whole squad to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. Now, we know the Queen is absolutely above politics. She may be above football too, but many locals harbour this quiet, secret view that she's actually, privately, a gooner. In her reign, Mr. Speaker, she's seen off 12 Prime Ministers. Whilst recently I attended my first state dinner, she's received over 100 state visits and visited, as the Prime Minister indicated, well over 100 countries on our behalf. I admire her energy, wish her well in her continuing and outstanding commitment to public life. I wish her a very happy 90th birthday.
Thank you. Sir Nicholas Soames.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Jim Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to follow the right honourable gentleman from Aldershot, and I'm grateful to be able to contribute to this collective greeting. I just wish to relate 3 experiences from my period as Vice-Chamberlain of the Royal Household between 2003 and 2005. The Senior Honourable Lady, the existing Vice-Chamberlain, I believe to be in her place. As colleagues will know, the Vice-Chamberlain, who traditionally is a senior government whip, has a variety of duties to fulfil. 3 of them are: 1, designing a daily message to send to Her Majesty, outlining what's happening here, acting as hostage during the state openings of Parliament, and taking treaties to be signed by Her Majesty and presenting them here to the House of Commons. When I was first presented to Her Majesty in 2003 and and asked her the same question as I'm sure all my predecessors and successors, what she'd like to see in the message, her answer was, that which generally doesn't make the papers will be of interest. And I was, just give us the gossip, that which is not fit to print. But given the way that we are reported in today's media, that's a pretty high bar. But I did manage to achieve it, I know, on at least one occasion. The second duty is as hostage, since we, or rather our predecessors, executed Charles I in 1649, every time the monarch comes to visit us, we have to send a senior MP to act as a hostage, and I did that on 2 occasions. And I did get the impression of being Patrick McGowan in The Prisoner, that I was not allowed to leave, although I never actually tried. But the Buckingham Palace officials were very generous, very hospitable. They said I could watch TV, read the papers, have a coffee, gin and tonic, walk about, but I wasn't leaving. And when I expressed my anxiety at this experience to the head of our armed forces a short time later, Sir Mike Jackson, he said, "Oh, Jim, you shouldn't have worried." I said, "Shouldn't I, Mike?" He said, "No." He said, "If anything happened to Her Majesty, we would have just shot you." And he wasn't kidding, and I'm sure you know that. And the third experience, Mr. Speaker, is one Easter when we had to have a document signed to be presented to the House, and the civil servants in the Whip's office contacted Buckingham Palace, who responded that Her Majesty wasn't at Buckingham Palace. It was Easter, she was at Windsor, and our officials said, well, Fitzpatrick will go to Windsor to get this document signed. And the message came back from Her Majesty, and the officials looked at me and said, Her Majesty said, if Mr. Fitzpatrick is coming all the way to Windsor, ask him if he'd like to stay to lunch. And my civil servant said, do you want to stay to lunch? I said, bite her royal hand off. Except I don't think I used the word royal. And when I was being driven down in the government car to Windsor Castle, beautiful sunny Monday, April, Easter day, I was wondering how many people does Her Majesty entertain to lunch at Easter on a Monday. And there were 6 of us, her private secretary, 3 equerries, myself and Her Majesty. And I was totally unprepared for this. And it's a measure of the humanity, the humanness of the dear lady, that for an hour and a half she commanded the conversation round the table and included everybody. And not having known her at all before, demonstrated her charm, her generosity and her regalness. I'm very grateful for the experience of having been Vice-Chamberlain for 2 years, and I'm very grateful to add my and my constituents' greetings to Her Majesty on this very auspicious day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.